excited to share all of this good information this month. And welcome to the team over at DanceATL. Thank you for helping us out with the series this month. We're looking forward to it. I am going to ask that everyone, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I'm going to leave it to our colleagues at DanceATL to determine if you want to answer questions in between your discussion and topic transitions, or if you want to do it at the end. Tasha and I will be able to help you. We'll read those questions online. I am recording. I've started that recording, so it actually will be ready at the end of our session, and we'll share this meeting with you. I'm also I'm using AI to take notes, so I'll have those as well. I'm going to turn the mic over to Samantha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sammy Spriggs, and I'm the operations manager for DanceATL. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am a pink, pale-skinned white lady with flippy bangs, short hair, and glasses. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you. For those of you who don't know, DanceATL is a dance service nonprofit here in Atlanta. And we do a variety of programs, including some educational programs that we would love to share with you today. And I am joined here by two other panelists. But before we begin, I just want to start by acknowledging that DanceATL operates and that many of our community members live and work within the ancestral and unceded territories of the Lower Muskogee Creek and Eastern Band of Cherokee peoples. Hiroko is going to share something in the chat that you can look and use the tool provided to search for your address and see whose ancestral land upon which you live and work. And if you are interested in sharing that in the chat, if you live outside of the Atlanta area, feel free to share that in the chat. I would love to see who else's land we are operating on. I also want to acknowledge that ours is an intersectional and diverse community built by and consisting of people of the global majority, including Black people, AAPI people, Latinx people, Indigenous people, as well as queer and trans people and disabled people. To support a full creative life for all, DanceATL commits to championing policies and practices that empower a just, inclusive, equitable community. We work to hold ourselves accountable to this promise and invite our community to join us in that accountability work. We believe in interrogating the status quo and using our creative energies to make a better dance community and a better world. And now for some housekeeping. Please keep yourself muted if possible, unless we have time for live question and answer at the end. We have a lot of info to get to you. So do pop questions in the chat throughout. And then there will also be a few exercises during the talk today where you can use the chat function to participate. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen and I'm gonna introduce our other panelists. So I'm going to hand it over to Julie to introduce herself.
Thank you very much. My name is Julie Galle Baggenstoss. I am a white woman. I have brown hair and brown eyes. My hair is tied behind my head. I'm wearing a beige shirt with a black cardigan today, and I am glad to be here. Let's see, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I have a background as a flamenco dancer. I'm an executive director of a nonprofit, A Través, which is focused on flamenco arts. I'm also a teaching artist, published scholar, university professor, all in flamenco arts. And in the land of creative movement, I work as a teaching artist across the Southeast. So thanks for joining today.
Hi, I'm Hiroko. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a half Japanese woman wearing glasses, a striped shirt, black hair, bangs. I am DanceATL's community engagement coordinator. I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. And I'm going to just pass it over to Julie to get us into some info about our grant writing.
Thank you. So an overview of what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about artist statements and resumes, and that is how to present yourself on paper. And then project narratives, how to describe your proposed project. We're going to talk about budgets, how to organize, categorize, and balance, and also dream big in terms of money there. And then we'll talk about reporting and compliance, what happens after you're awarded. So there's the application process, and then what happens next when you get the award. We'll also briefly discuss supporting materials and provide names and links to a variety of funding opportunities for individual artists, as well as those available for nonprofit organizations. Hiroko?
Yeah, so here are some general do's and don'ts of effective grant writing. So you want to avoid kind of using jargon or cliches and be very like intentional and specific with your language. I would still add to that. I think especially like as an independent artist, sounding like yourself is still very important. And some examples of like buzzwords or phrases that are kind of more commonly used to describe art and art practices are, collaborative, immersive, groundbreaking, but going the extra mile and being able to be specific about how in your creative process or in your work you're accomplishing the act of collaborating, or the ways in which your audience or participants are going to be immersed in your work rather than just, name dropping these words. Be sure to use active voice. So avoiding I hope to, I will, or I try to, and outsourcing your proofreading. So many eyes is so important, right? In order to critique and craft and edit the best copy for your grant application. And a really good practice is to try to include proofreaders who might not be as familiar with your work or might not be either in the world of dance or even in the arts. That way they're helping you craft more clear and accessible sort of writing statements. And they'll probably have questions and feedback that's going to help you create a better narrative. And so you really want to hone in on what makes you and your work very unique, being specific about this. You're explaining the steps within your own process, your research modalities, methodologies, rehearsal process, collaborators, the format that you're going to take of sharing it publicly, whether that's like a performance, a gallery, public space. You want to avoid sort of nebulous descriptions. So even if you're process oriented, you need to be clear in describing your sort of proposed outcomes. There's always going to be the opportunity to like adapt later on, but if the funder doesn't understand your proposal initially, it's likely that you won't receive the grant. And so during the reporting process, there's always going to be the opportunity to explain if your outcomes have shifted. So don't feel like you're pigeonholing yourself by like having to commit to an outcome even before you've started the work, right? You're not 100% committed to the exact project that you're proposing. And be thorough about you can communicate. So there are real and very helpful people at these granting organizations. And so you can always ask questions before an application or a deadline or during a process to clear up unknowns. A lot of these, I know Fulton County always has info webinars before grant applications are due. And those can be so beneficial. And so you want to plan ahead so that you have time to ask these questions and communicate. And you can work on these materials. Here you go, Sammy.
Awesome. So I'm going to take it away with kind of talking about an artist statement. Anybody who has gone through a college dance program or similar has probably had to craft an artist statement at some point. But an artist statement is a series of sentences that describe what you make and why you make it. It helps you understand your own practice because you are translating a nonverbal solitary thing. This is taken directly from our grant resources toolkit, which we will link in the chat later. But it is available for free on the DanceATL website under our resources tab. So getting into an artist statement and the basics of it. The what is the medium or mediums within which you work. So be specific, be clear. You can say dance, but if you can get even more specific, like talking about flamenco, or if you are fusing Bharatanatyam with contemporary dance, like funders want to hear those things. Those are things that are specific to you. So get specific in your artist statement. The why is your work important to you, and what impact will it make on the world? Be sure to express the value of your work and communicate it. The how, describe your process. What makes it unique? They want to understand what they're supporting. And so if you can explain how you do what you do, it kind of lets them in a way that makes it more compelling from a funding perspective. And then other things to ask yourself as you're brainstorming your artist statement: what community or audience is your work reaching or serving? What are your influences and inspirations? And what is the through line across your body of work? So if your work is constantly kind of tackling social justice issues, put that as your artist statement. If that is important to you as an artist to make work that is social justice oriented, that should absolutely be a part of your artist statement. Or if your work is all free to access, if you never charge admissions fees, or it's always site specific, those are things that need to be a part of your artist statement that communicate who you are as an artist and what funders can expect from your work. I'm going to pass it back to Julie.
All right, thank you, Sammy. And so I want to talk about resumes and CVs right now. A lot of times, grant applications, they may ask for a bio or some brief description of yourself, your own experience, or that of collaborators or partners on a project. But when they specifically need a resume or a CV, there are a few things to keep in mind. One is to keep it short. Try to limit these documents to 2 pages or less. And then you want to tailor the information on your resume to the specific grant, to each specific grant or funding opportunity. And so as you tailor it to one opportunity, you want to take away maybe the irrelevant work experience that might be there that's not specific or germane to that opportunity. Let's see, also highlight your core skills in bullet points to emphasize certain strengths outside of job descriptions. Make it easy to read and navigate with clear and simple formatting. Do include and highlight honors and awards. And then make it clear in your document that you can deliver on the proposed project. And that helps align this kind of supporting documentation, excuse me, with a grant opportunity. And I will add to update that document often. Okay, now back to Hiroko.
Your project narrative. Of course, it is a description of the project that you're proposing, but it's also the goals and the objectives and a very brief plan of action. So most grant application guidelines are going to ask for a statement that includes most or all of the following: the purpose, goal, or objectives of your research/project, its significance, contribution, impact on your community, the timeline that you're working with or your work plan, and then your projected outcome or and deliverables. And so in writing these narratives, you really want to try to find grants that best fit your project's needs rather than transforming your project to fit the opportunity itself. Although, I mean, you can always brainstorm ways to make yourself eligible for certain grants in future cycles. I'm guilty of this a little bit where I go, wait, I could come up with like an environmental justice art project right now.
Yeah.
Uh, and I always like to go through and sort of review the foundation or granting organization. Oh, I'm sorry.
$25.
Could you mute your phone quickly? Thank you so much. So I like to go through and review the foundation or the granting organization's funding goals for what their primary commitments are. I also kind of like to look at the language that they're using itself and kind of pull it apart. And I don't want to say like use it, but use it. Make them see themselves in you, but you can still have it be sincere, you know? And so I'm looking at like what populations and communities that they're committed to serving, and also like listing out previous accomplishments or similar comparable projects that you had that were successful, and thinking about how you would write about your success. I'm gonna pass it back to Julie.
Thank you. So thinking about what Hiroko is mentioning in terms of a narrative and making sure that your project is a fit for the grant, and making sure that the grant panel can understand your grant. I want to walk back one step here in the process, which is researching grants to determine which grants you might be eligible for, and so that you might want to apply for. And to take the step back, I want to ask you guys to participate in a little activity. So find your chat function wherever it is on your device, and let's do 3 things together. And let's go through each of these 3 steps one at a time, all together, because they're scaffolded. So on the screen right now, there's a statement, and I'm going to read it out loud. But first, I want to give a little context that this statement comes from the South Arts website, where the organization is describing its grant for individual artists. And the context that I want to give is that this grant is specifically for artists who have been given an opportunity that will change their career, that might propel their career forward or give it a significant turn in an interesting direction. So with that context in mind, have a listen while I read the statement, and let's go to the second part of the activity, which is where I want you to listen for keywords in the statement that might help you either directly or indirectly identify criteria that the granting organization may have identified when they created the grant. So we're not to the point yet where the grant panel is reading your application and evaluating it, but we're a couple steps before that where we're researching what grants to apply for. So you're looking for what was that granting organization thinking of when they were thinking about categories of artists or kinds of projects that they might want to fund. All right, and so when you come up with the keywords, I want to ask you to put them in the chat, and then we'll use those keywords for the next phase of this activity. Here comes the statement. South Arts recognizes that more than an invitation to participate in a significant milestone opportunity is required. Even with stipends or payments, overall expenses can make such an opportunity inaccessible. So we'll leave this up on the screen, and I'm going to ask you what kinds of words in that statement might indicate the kinds of artists who would be eligible to apply for this individual artist grant. And I'll give you a few seconds to put some words in the chat. There are no right or wrong answers, by the way. All right, I see some responses coming in the chat. All right, so significant milestone, not necessarily emerging artists, but maybe mid-career. Significant milestone. Milestone, those who don't have a springboard or support from an institution already. Inaccessible, milestone, opportunity inaccessible due to financial. All right, thank you. I'm gonna say thank you to everyone. Oh, we got a couple more coming in here. Another, let's see here. Coming down here, those who don't inaccessible, milestone, invitation, milestone, inaccessible, expenses. All right, these are fantastic words. Okay, with those reading skills in mind, that now we have these keywords, the next phase and the last phase of the activity is to think about your own descriptors, your characteristics, your qualifications, where you are at this moment, maybe where you were last month or where you'll be next month even. Think about your descriptors that answer the criteria that you or someone else who put a word in the chat identified. So that is to say, what is it about you that matches the criteria or doesn't for, maybe that's the case. If you can think about things that do match up, some descriptors about yourself that do match up with these criteria, then this might be a great grant for you to apply for. If not, then it might be one for you to table for the moment, or for you to think about, like, how could I become eligible for something like this the next time that the grant becomes open. Okay, let's do this activity one more time, go a little bit faster through it this next time. Sammy, will you please advance the slide and we'll go to the next statement. And I'll give you the background on this one. This is not a statement from a grant application. It is a statement from the website of Alternate Routes, which offers applications. Right now, this organization doesn't have grant applications open, but it does regularly open applications for individual artists. So I might look at the website and see if this is a website I need to come and revisit again in a few months to see what's going on with their applications later. So let's go through this again. That's the context. I'm going to read the statement out loud and ask you to put some keywords in the chat that might indicate criteria about what is this granting organization looking for in terms of projects and artists. Okay, here's the statement. Alternate Routes supports the creation and presentation of original art that is rooted in communities of place, tradition, or spirit. We are a group of artists and cultural organizers based in the South, creating a better world together. As Alternate Routes, we call for social and economic justice and are working to dismantle all forms of oppression everywhere. And that's the end of the statement. So I'll give you a moment or two to put some words in the chat, things that might indicate what the grantors are looking for. Okay, we have this here. Some words are coming in. I'm going to try to get to the top of this. There we go. Original art, communities of place, call for social justice and economic justice, dismantling oppression, original art, social and economic justice, original art based in the South, justice, dismantling oppression, local. All right, social and economic justice, communities, cultural organizers, dismantle all forms of oppression. Okay, thank you for all of those responses. And so now again, with the reading skills that have taken place and the keywords that have been identified, this is a moment when you can think about your own descriptors and whether or not those might match up with what this organization is looking for in terms of categories of artists or projects. And then you can determine if this is a great place for you to revisit later and check out a grant application when they're available. And so this is stepping backward, back to that researching the grant phase. And I offer this as a strategy to help select grants that might be interesting and potentially successful, and then to step forward to make those applications. So we'll get back into that process of writing the application, and I'm going to send it back to Hiroko for components of a narrative.
So continuing these components of a narrative and including both that you could be talking about yourself as an individual artist, or some of you might have your own organizations or companies. And so, of course, there will be the introduction. an organizational description if you are applying on behalf of a company. And so you're describing the work and programs of your company, distinguishing your company and its work from others. What I've done in the past when I've applied for grants from an arts organization, I've really like thought about the programming in different aspects and focused on the best program that fits that grant and spent time talking about that because there's just in 1,500 character counts, including spaces, there's just not the time. There would never be the time to talk about all that DanceATL does or all that your organization does. So really like clarifying it and almost simplifying in these ways. So you want to enlarge the funder's view of you from a company to a community asset and really include your company's mission, when you're founded, a brief description of the programming that you offer, who you're affiliated with, and note your major accomplishments and describe the ways in which your public service extends kind of beyond just programming. The program description, and so you need to provide a concrete description of the project that you're proposing, public or community impact of the work, use data when appropriate to support your position, lay out the need or opportunity they would be supporting. Don't assume that they would be aware of all the resource gaps or challenges within the dance industry and community. You need to be able to describe what you will do and how you're going to do it, and being very specific and giving examples of when you've accomplished this. Your work plan / your implementation of it, you need to describe specifically the activities that will be a part of this implementation process. Include a work plan with actionable goals or benchmarks for this project. If you have specific dates, use them. Attach a one-page list providing short bios of key project personnel. This includes both staff and volunteers. Your community impact and evaluation. So you need to think about what will change or improve as a result of this project. You need to identify the demographics of the community that is served, who, what, where, when, and why. Location, target audience, reach. You need to know how you're going to connect and get people there, how you're going to impact them. You need to detail the methods for collecting impact data. And this could look like surveys or focus groups or polls, or even if you're just counting ticket sales and attendance numbers of an event. How are you going to measure your success from said proposed activity? I'm going to send this back to Julie.
All right, thank you. So evaluation is one of the most interesting and exciting parts of work, and it's also, in my opinion, like nebulous, because there are so many ways that you can evaluate your work, and you want to make sure that the way that you're evaluating is helpful to the grantors. And so one way to do that is to focus on community. And so I want to ask you again, take it to the chat function and participate, please, in a little activity to delve into community, because understanding who you're serving can help you measure impact, as well as participation at an event. So once again, I'm going to give you some context about a statement that's on the screen, and then I'm going to read the statement. And this time I want you to think about who might be the communities impacted by this project. And think about it from 360 degrees and inside and out, if you will. Okay, so this first statement that I'm going to read is from a project that was presented on the Atlanta Beltline 10 years ago. So it was a very different Beltline than it is right now. And back then, the Beltline was, and it still is to this point, but being very different, there was a lot of the Beltline that was not developed 10 years ago as it is now. And so the Beltline was really getting artists out to help to introduce the idea of the Beltline and to show us where it's going to be when these places were not at all paved back then. And so let's see. This statement comes from Je suis. This is the name of the performance, which is French. In English, it's I am, and it was presented or performed by Core, presented on the Atlanta Beltline in 2014. And so this is a statement that Core published, that Atlanta Beltline published describing the work. So think about communities that could be served by this work. Here's the statement. This work is an 18-month creative collaboration and cultural exchange between sister cities Toulouse and Atlanta. The ensemble uses contemporary dance to explore the integrally related stories of who we are and where we live. Deeply personal and concurrently universal, using text, movement, and music, Je suis intertwines both cores and manifests visions of our own and each other's cities and countries. So I'll ask you to think about what kinds of communities might be impacted or involved in this work. All right, some responses are coming in. So we have communities of both cities where it is being presented. And so we have Toulouse and we have Atlanta in there. Underserved communities, French speaking. And so as you guys put these communities in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and make this connection here that when a community is served or impacted or involved in a project, then that community can be a place to seek data in terms of how levels of participation or levels of impact or what kind of impact has taken place. All right, let's see here. And I see a couple more. We have dancers, art enthusiasts, other artists. All right. Good. All right, let's go to the next statement. We have one more of these, and I'm going to ask you guys to do the same thing. Think about communities impacted and think about who might attend. Okay, yep, there you go. Who might attend the performance, who might live in the area around the performance. And then again, thinking, you might think in terms of demographics, geography, and even the presenters. So what is a presenting organization, being that the artist is being presented by the organization? So there are different channels to get out to promote the work. Okay, this next statement is about the work Private Gestures, Public Places by Anika Austin this year, 2024. And in this case, we have the context that the performer conducted research that included letters gathered at writing stations, again, along the Atlanta Beltline, and correspondence between artists based on prompts about architecture, landscape, and with a focus on ecology, birth, myth, and memory. Also in the research, there were interviews with Atlanta-based arts organizations, performers, scholars, and organizers. So that kind of idea is the background of this description, again, by the Atlanta Beltline about this project. Here we go. Private Gestures, Public Spaces is a reading of how the moving body in outdoor space learns, makes meaning, shapes and abstracts time, and connects with story and people across generations. So based on that artist statement, what kind of communities do you think, what kind of different groups of people do you think might be impacted by this work? And when you have your answer, you can put it in the chat, by the way. All right, people who use outdoor spaces, children, seniors, differently abled, right? And so as these responses come in, I'm going to ask you to imagine also, like, how might you ask questions to these different groups to gather information to evaluate your project. The way that you might ask information of children might be different of how you might ask information or ask for feedback from seniors, for example. Okay, some other responses coming in about community. We have architecture and sustainability organizations and firms, environmental education organizations, especially those that focus on youth, those interested in space and the body in space, visual artists. All right. Okay, so thank you guys for those responses, and I hope that this activity, oh, we have some more coming in, birthing people and storytellers. Thank you. I hope that this activity offers a strategy to think about as we look at works that have already been presented. It offers a strategy for you to think about your own work and how different communities might be attracted to, might participate in, and might be impacted by your work in a way that they can help you offer data to evaluate your work to the funders. All right, and that's the end of this activity, so thank you, and I'm going to go to Sammy for budgets now.
All right, a budget. So to start this off, I want to say I did not go to business school. I went to dance college. I have a dance degree, and I'm responsible for an organization's budget. So it is not as scary as it may seem. I was terrified of this idea before I then worked in nonprofits. But so I want to just kind of give you the basics of creating a budget, especially if you don't have a background in finance or accounting. The boon is that a lot of funders will provide you with their own blank template to fill in with your numbers. And it's actually a really great idea to look at one of those. I've put in here the sample budget template and categories from Fulton County. This is from the application cycle for this past fiscal year. So it includes fiscal year 22 and 23. Fiscal year, it depends on the organization. So if you're working as an independent artist, it can just be like the project term. But if you're in an organization, you define your fiscal year in your bylaws. DanceATL's fiscal year, for example, runs July 1st to June 30th. Some organizations go with calendar year. That's kind of different organization to organization. But that's how you break down your budget. So currently DanceATL is at the end of fiscal year 2024, and we will be in fiscal year 2025 on July 1st, 2024. So just a few things about that. But using these templates is a great way to kind of give you a clue on how to organize your finances as an organization or as an artist. I always say it's a great idea to keep track of your project budgets outside of your personal budget if you are an independent artist, so that you're not going into debt making your own work. A lot of us do it. I know I do it because, you know, sometimes you don't have the forethought to have gone for an independent artist grant. There also aren't as many independent artist grants as there are independent artists making work all the time. So it's a great idea to keep those finances separate if possible. It's also not always possible for everybody. I know I am not always committed to that as an independent artist because I want to just be able to make my work, and I'm committed to paying my collaborators. So, but pay attention to how they organize their template, what categories they have. They will also likely in grant guidelines list ineligible expenses. So a lot of project-based grants will not cover general operations costs. So like payroll is something that often will not be covered by a project-based grant. Now, paying contractors is something different. And so like paying collaborators can absolutely usually be a part of a project grant because that's personnel. But if you're with an organization, oftentimes if you're applying for project-based funding, you can't pay your operations manager salary from a project-based grant. So those are things to just pay attention to. Make sure that you're reading those guidelines carefully so that you're not making your budget with the assumption that you can use their funds for everything. Yeah. I'm just pulling up my notes to make sure I'm not breezing past anything as I riff a little bit. Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go on to a few key terms that you may not have been super familiar with. So oftentimes you'll see things listed on these budgets as in-kind versus actual expenses. In-kind describes donated goods or services. So these are things like if you have a best friend who's a lighting designer who wants to do your lighting design for free, good for you, and that's an in-kind donation. So it still carries a value in regards to the budget, even if you're not spending actual money towards that cost. Actual expenses are things that require actual money. So if you have to buy costume materials, or if you are paying a stage manager, things like that go under actual expenses rather than in-kind. The other thing that's really smart about including in-kind expenses on your budget proposals for these grants is to show that you've thought through the full scope of your project. So if you're leaving off key elements that funders know generally go into your kind of project and you're not mentioning it at all anywhere in your application of where that resource is coming from, that maybe shows that you haven't thought it through. If you are super thorough, it shows that you have a better grasp of the scope of your project and will be more appealing to funders because they'll see that you've thought through all of the pieces and parts and have accounted for all of the like foreseeable needs. Yeah. Then we go into eligible versus ineligible, which I talked about a little bit. So yes, read those guidelines carefully. Only account for expenses that are allowed under the granting guidelines. You will also be asked to show where other money is coming from. So it could be that you have, like in your projection, you know that you're going to be doing an Indiegogo or a GoFundMe campaign. So you can allot those funds for things like payroll or things that are ineligible otherwise under this grant's guidelines. But just make sure that you're making that distinction, that you know that things that are not eligible under this grant are accounted for from something else and not just lumped in with everything you're asking for to cover with the grant you're applying for if it's ineligible. And then when possible, pay yourself. This is something that I just want to continuously emphasize to dance artists and choreographers and directors. Don't forget the service that you provide as the director and choreographer. You put a lot of work and time into this, and when possible, you need to include your rate in the artistic personnel category. So not to say that you are, applying for a grant necessarily to buy your groceries, but if someone were to commission you to come in and direct or choreograph something, you would have a rate, right? So I think it's always smart to include what that rate would be on your proposed budget, because oftentimes you'll ask for an ideal number and get less than what you've asked for, and then you'll make adjustments from there. But it's always a good idea to make sure that you're accounting for paying yourself for your value as a choreographer or director. That's my soapbox. I also, while I'm in here, because I realized I did not make a slide for this, but I wanted to talk a little bit about supporting materials. They help make your application stand out. A lot of times these can be professional photos, these can be videos. There are really handy free online tools to like fancy them up so that your work samples give a better presentation of what you offer. So like a free Canva account is a great thing because you can compile images and narrative into like a really great PDF that shows like, images of what you're describing so that they get a better sense of like, okay, these are the actual people who are at this event. These are the people interacting with the art that I'm proposing. Here's this image of these people participating in this performance in a park. It's really good to have documentation of your work, first of all, because it helps funders see that you have done this before and get an idea of what your vision is. And it's also just really good for you to have. So like video everything, document everything, develop relationships with photographers and videographers so you're not necessarily having to do it all yourself. I know we have some photographers in the room right now who are excellent. So yeah, I think it's really important to consider all of those things, and make sure that your work samples and supporting documents are really thorough and fancy looking, even if you don't have the funds um, to pay a graphic designer to put together like promo materials for you. It's actually really simple. Like, stay simple and clean is my number one go-to advice, and make it all like really easy to navigate. Your supporting materials should be very clear. Don't submit a video where you're like, okay, navigate to 2 minutes and 45 seconds in and watch till this point and then skip ahead. Like, you can edit video down in Canva for free. It like literally Canva will save your life. If you have not played with it yet, do it. It will help you and make your supporting materials really much more compelling. Okay, I wanted to jump into really quickly some available grants. So we just kind of compiled a very brief list. In our, Hiroko, will you add to the chat the link to our grant resources toolkit? A lot of this information is covered in DanceATL's grant resources toolkit that Julie kind of oversaw the building of in 2021. The last few pages has a lot of these grants, but some of those listings are out of date. We're going to work on an update this summer and get that out soon. But these are just some that you can look into. So if you're 501c3, on the left-hand side of the page, these are grant opportunities to look into, depending on where you're located. Obviously, like county specific or city specific grants only apply if your organization is housed in those areas. But they're great things to look at. It's always helpful to have like a starting off point. I will say the other thing that I do as someone who works for a nonprofit is I look at websites of similar nonprofits in my area and look at who their funders are to see, okay, so if their work was funded by like the Imlay Foundation, for example, I'm going to go to their website, look at what their values are, look at who else they've funded, and see if it really would be a good match. And likely, you're more likely to narrow it down that way than doing just like a Google search on like who funds nonprofits in Georgia, because there are a lot of nonprofits. But look at nonprofit dance companies and see who is funding them and see if you can get in on that pool. I think that's a great way to kind of narrow down your search. And then as an individual artist, we all know the struggle is real. And there are seemingly very few opportunities that are actually available to independent artists, but there are some. Arts and Entertainment Atlanta is available to both nonprofits and independent artists. Their grant, it's a $5,000 grant. We received it last year. Anika Austin's work that we used an example earlier was funded by A&E. And they are actually very intentional about making their reporting process way simple. So that's a really great one if you're first starting out in the kind of grant application world. It's really great. They're also super accessible as an office. Like they respond to emails really well. They'll hop on a Zoom call if you have questions. Like, I highly recommend folks look into that grant. It's part of the Atlanta Downtown Improvement District project. So there is like a location boundary around that grant. So you have to be within their borders in that neighborhood. So that does take some planning because you have to identify locations that are like within that, but like Underground Atlanta is a part of that, the Broad Street Boardwalk, Woodruff Park. So there are definitely the Rialto and the Balzer Theater at Herons. Those are all kind of within those boundaries of downtown. So that's a really great one. Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs offers a grant for independent artists. Idea Capital, the Nexus Fund, the MAP Fund, Doris Duke Foundation, Creative Capital, South Arts, like we mentioned earlier, their independent artist career opportunity grant, their application cycle just closed, but that's a great one to keep on your radar for future if you didn't apply for it. Alternate Roots Artistic Assistance usually opens up once a year. And then I also wanted to just plug our friends over at Dance USA. We'll be accepting letters of interest in June 2024 for their Fellowships to Artists Cycle 3. Now, this is a hugely funded artist fellowship program. They are re-granting from the Doris Duke Foundation. And these are it's like the dance community's smaller cousin of a MacArthur grant, because it's very unrestricted in terms of funds, and they're $31,000 grants that go to artists. I know past recipients have said that this money is actually life-changing in terms of their creative practice, some of whom are Atlanta-based. Like Laurel Lawson is one of the first cycle grant recipients who she danced with Full Radius for a long time. She was a part of Kinetic Light and travels, and she lives and works here part-time in Atlanta. So that is coming up. DanceATL will have information on when that application cycle is open. We'll include it in our Monday Moves and put it out on our social media so folks are aware as well. But that's a really great one to look out for coming up. And then, so I want to get to questions, but real quick in the chat, I want to pop in the rest of our lunch and learns that are coming up, because every Tuesday in May we have a lunch and learn, and then we can save these last 10 minutes for some questions. But there are links in the chat to register for the upcoming panels. So next week we have organizational resilience, which is performance company leaders in conversation. We have Douglas from Full Radius, and then Nina and Waverly from Bell Ethnic talking about how they have made it so long in their nonprofits. They have some of the longest standing dance performance company nonprofits in the city, and we're going to learn from them on how they made it work for this long, what they've learned in their many years in service to the dance community, and kind of any insights that they have. I'm really excited for that conversation. In 2 weeks, we have Curating Your Career, Considerations for the Independent Dance Artist, and we'll be joined by Ariana Allen, Meg Gorley, and Danny Swatsy talking about kind of what their non-negotiables are for taking work, how they network, and other considerations they have as independent dance artists who don't operate a nonprofit organization. And then on the last Tuesday in May, we're going to have a dancer health roundtable with the folks from Atlanta Dance Medicine and Wise Woman Embodied, which is just Sephora Gerson Miller, who is a dance movement therapist and licensed clinical social worker. So we'll be talking about all things dancer health, mental health, resources for dancers and dance artists with or without access to health insurance, and what is available here to you in Atlanta. So yeah, so those are all coming up. And so I want to get into some questions. I see Faye Monet has a question. Is it possible to be both a 501c3 and an individual artist, or do you have to choose? So you can be both. So you can have and operate a 501c3. Like this is the case I know for Nadia Zeitlin and Bautanztier. She now has been incorporated as Bautanztier as a nonprofit, but there are certain kinds of projects that don't fit within that umbrella. So Bautanztier is site specific, whereas Nadia, if she wants to do a performance within a proscenium theater, she can, but she is using that as under her personal name as an independent artist. So she can apply for grants that way, or under the Bautanztier umbrella if she's looking for funding for her company work. And Julie, it looks like you have something to contribute there.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I am the executive director of 501c3, and so we produce work through that nonprofit. And I also, my teaching artist work is completely independent of that. So I've got 2 pathways going constantly. The only advice is to watch out for conflict of interest and make sure that you're clear. And if you do establish a 501c3, keep your board advised constantly of what's going on, so that if any questions come up, everybody is ready to answer.
I love that. Yeah, communication is key. Does anybody else have any questions? We have about 6 minutes left in this session. We want to be really respectful of everybody's time, because I know it's the middle of a work day for a lot of folks. But would love to answer any questions that pop up. Feel free to, has anyone learned great writing by trial and error, or have you taken training courses? I think a lot of us start by trial and error. Yeah.
Both.
Yeah,
I will say, if I could just pop in really quick, a really good tool for people who are grant writers or are interested in writing grants is to be a panelist for grants. So like we just completed our panel process. And like South Arts has one. I know the what is it? The Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs has one. But when you are a panelist, you get to look at other people's grants, how they lay them out. When you're like talking with your fellow panelists, you'll find out what they find powerful in grants, what they don't like, or what they don't find as being clear and concise. So I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in grant writing, to be a panelist for a couple of different organizations. Take a look at how they run things, what people like, what people don't like, and that will serve to help make you a stronger grant writer.
Yes, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? Let's see. Someone else told me they did that, but okay. Tasha, where have you seen calls for panelists? Do they just kind of pop up as needed, or?
They usually pop up as needed, where, during the time that the granting entity is looking for a panelist. You can usually find them, like the applications for panelists, on websites, on their, those people's websites. If you, like, your friend may have applied and didn't hear back, maybe that entity had enough panelists, or maybe they maybe didn't see her application. So I would definitely encourage them to reach out to the organization and say, hey, I was wanted to be a panelist, what's going on? And usually somebody will get back to you. But check websites. You can do a quick Google search for like arts panels in, in the Southeast, and it'll come up with a websites of organizations that are looking for panelists, and you can apply that way. But we are trying to restructure how we go do our call for panelists, because we did do a call for panelists, and a few people kind of slipped through the cracks because of like our website and stuff like that. So if your friend reached out to us and didn't hear back, tell her to email me. I will send them an application for next year, because we always are constantly on the look for panelists. We're going to make our call for panelists year round, so that we have like a store of applications at our beck and call. So yeah, tell them reach out to us. We're always looking for panelists.
Sweet. Thank you. Gosh. Any more questions? Anyone?
Made it
Good
back.
to see you back, Sammy. Yeah.
That was the strangest thing I've ever done.
Yes, Jesse. So that we've recorded the whole Zoom. We'll be able to make the presentation itself available to you on Fulton County Arts and Culture website, as well as the whole recorded Zoom. Everything will be saved and preserved for you. Yeah.
And I want to plug again that on the DanceATL website, under resources, the Grant Resources Toolkit is available all the time for free and has a lot of this information in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is always available to folks. I know sometimes it is easier to hear people talk through it, but it is there. We're always at DanceATL, we're always open for questions, chats. If you want advice on stuff, that's what we're here for. So please feel free to email us at info@danceatl.org, and one of us will get back to you for sure. And I also want to just plug and thank Chantress and Tasha and Sharon at Fulton County Arts and Culture, because they are really wonderful humans who really want to support the arts here in Atlanta. And they put together programs like this all the time for various artistic mediums. They really support the dance community, and we are so thankful to have partnered with them for this. And also, if you're applying for a Fulton County Arts and Culture Contracts for Services grant, they're the folks that you will email with relentlessly, and they're lovely and awesome and will answer all of your questions, and even without judgment, which I very much appreciate, because sometimes I feel like my questions are maybe not the most smart, but they are always very generous. So please know that
there are no bad questions. No bad questions.
I love them, basically, is what I'm saying. And that, you know, if you're going out for Fulton County Art.
You might have froze.
Yeah, you froze a little bit, Sammy. We didn't hear what your last few words.
Oh, sorry. I was singing your praises, so it is important. But basically, we love them and they're wonderful, and you should know them too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We feel the love.
Good. Well, if there are no further questions, it's 1 o'clock. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Please join us for our upcoming Lunch and Learns every Tuesday in May. And DanceATL has a lot of other stuff going on. So please join as a member, send us your events to our online calendar, check out our Monday moves every week. And feel free to email us anytime. We're here for the dance community. So if there are things you want recommendations for or feedback on, we will hook you up with the people who need to know about it. Yeah? Awesome. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day. Bye.